What's up, y'all? I'm Will here with Schedulefly, and this is the Restaurant Owners Uncorked podcast, one of the highest rated hospitality podcasts in the world, brought to you by us at Schedulefly. We provide a very simple web-based restaurant employee scheduling software backed by legendary customer service. If you're on pencil and paper or Excel, or you're on some software with tons of bells and whistles and features you don't need or use, Schedulefly is the perfect place for you. Easy to use, point, click, and go, and we'll take great care of you. Schedulefly.com, free trial, check it out. Also, this podcast is brought to you by our sponsors, Pop Menu and The Giving Kitchen and Kickfin, and you're going to hear about them in just a minute. First of all, let's talk about today's guest. What is up, y'all? Quite a special episode. I think this is about 2 hours long. Could have gone longer. Mollie Englehart. I heard about her because she's a lifelong vegan and has had very successful vegan restaurants in Los Angeles for many years. Became a farmer, became a regenerative farmer, realized that cattle were an important part of the process. Does not eat meat still herself, but will be serving meat. And what a story, and what a amazing woman who has what we all need, I believe, a lot more of, which is the willingness to continue to be open-minded, to grow and learn and realize that sometimes when we are steadfast about something, you know what, we may realize that we were wrong. And that's what she has done. And so this is the kind of person that I admire so greatly. This story is off the hook fantastic. She is an incredibly sharp, strong-willed lady. I felt very honored to have an opportunity to speak to her. I think Bon Appetit profiled her recently. There's been a lot of pushback from the vegan community. But you'll probably hear more and more about her on some of the biggest podcasts, not just hospitality podcasts, but some of the bigger podcasts anywhere, because this story is awesome, and so is she. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for watching. Give us a rating. We love you. More episodes coming soon. Give your team the gift of Pop Menu AI Answering, a simple solution for phones ringing off the hook. AI Answering handles calls 24/7, 365 days a year, so your staff can focus on in-person guests. Customize your greetings and responses, answer common questions, promote specials and events, and send follow-up links to ordering and reservations. AI Answering handles it all while escalating more complex conversations back to your team. Never miss another tasty revenue opportunity. Pop Menu, the marketing technology platform designed to make growing your restaurant easy. Discover more AI restaurant tools that turn your to-do list into an already done list by requesting a demo today. For a limited time, get $100 off your first month, plus lock in one unchanging monthly rate at popmenu.com. Go now to get $100 off your first month at popmenu.com. Be sure to tell them that Will from Restaurant Owners Uncorked podcast and Schedulefly sent you. Y'all, this is a great business. I just told you what they like me to say. I will say that we have a lot of mutual customers at Schedulefly with Pop Menu. They all agree. Great product, great customer service, great results. Check them out, popmenu.com. This episode is also brought to you by The Giving Kitchen. Giving Kitchen provides emergency assistance for food service workers through financial support and a network of community resources. Since its inception in 2013, Giving Kitchen has served over 15,000 food service workers and awarded over $10.5 million to food service workers in crisis. If you or someone you know is a food service worker in crisis, please ask for help. thegivingkitchen.org. And again, that's thegivingkitchen.org. Y'all, this is a phenomenal organization. Jen, the founder, has been on this podcast. Jen Heidinger Kendrick, check out that episode to hear their full story. But if you know somebody or you need help, go to thegivingkitchen.org. Incredible organization, and very responsive, and has a wonderful mission. Check them out. Everybody, this is an episode that I'm personally very excited about. I'm always excited about our episodes, but there's a lot of questions that I'm going to ask our guest today that I'm just personally very curious about in terms of diet and nutrition and my own personal journey, but it all has to do with how this applies to the world of restaurants, which all of you that are listening to this own or run or work for or work in restaurants or love restaurants, as does our guest. But she has a very unique restaurant story. So, Molly, will you just do me a favor and just introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, my name is Mollie Englehart, and I'm an executive chef and owner of a chain of restaurants in the Los Angeles area called Sage Vegan Bistro for the last 14 years, 13 years. We had, before the pandemic, we had four locations, large restaurants, full bar, 4 to 5,000 square foot restaurants, seating 2 to 300 guests. Is the style of restaurant, which we all know is a dying style of restaurant. That and during the overreach of the government, we had to close a couple of stores, and we just have two stores left. And we've been vegan and successfully vegan up until year over year, quarter over quarter. I had 11 years of consecutive growth until the second quarter of 2020, and it's been pretty rough since then. And I've subsequently had a journey on the side of farming, where I bought a farm to compost all the waste coming out of my restaurants in Los Angeles, when I realized that cow farts were not the problem, but food waste is the largest cause of methane. And so I bought a farm and I started composting all my food. So on a separate track, I've been learning about regenerative farming. And so just a couple of weeks ago, I announced that we're no longer going to be vegan in our restaurants as of the 29th of May, which is coming up here very soon. And we will be serving other food like grass-fed, grass-finished beef, eggs, pastured chicken, and wild venison, and also buffalo, field harvested buffalo. So people are angry with me, but that it's been a journey, and I'm doing what I believe is best. And a lot of people will say, "Oh, she's doing it for the money." And I say none of those people have ever run a restaurant, because we all know
Mm.
there's a lot easier ways to make money than farming or restaurants.
Ah, you've turned into this right wing evil capitalist who's only in it for the money, Molly. So, okay, look, gosh, you have such a fascinating story. So let's start from the beginning. You grew up um, as a vegan.
Yes,
You grew up with a very you didn't have vaccines, if I remember correctly. Your parents were sort of hippie. You weren't sanitizing everything you touched. You all kind of you just
I never sanitizer, never, no scented products, no like real cleaning products in our house, except for like some sort of eco dish. It was called Basic H. I don't know what it was, but it was a natural cleaner, but no cleaners. And we were just very living. My mom, we grew vegetables, and my mom and dad got married very young. My mom was like my dad was like 19, and my mom was 20, or 20 and 21 when they got married and had me. And my mom, read some book about the industrial food industry and the way the animals are treated. And it horrified her. And the reality is, it horrifies anybody who actually is present to how our food is produced. And so she stopped eating meat, and she stopped eating dairy. And then one time she tried to make us cookies when I was like 5 years old, and she left the margarine in the oven and it turned to a plastic sheet. And she was like, I am never going to feed that. So we were vegan, but we ate butter. So that would best describe, after 5 years old, my mom gave up margarine and added butter to our diet. But we always ate very healthy whole foods, nothing processed, no ultra processed foods. And we were pretty poor. My mom worked for a bakery. She would get a lot of the buggy flour that had the bugs that sometimes would get moths or whatever in the flour, and she'd filter it out in the put it in the freezer so the bugs would die, and then she'd sift it out. And then we ate a lot of pancakes, a lot of sourdough bread. And then she would order soybeans in bulk. And my mom's identical twin worked at the food co-op. My mom was really into food, but we didn't have a lot of money. So my mom worked at an organic bakery, and my auntie worked at a health food store, her twin sister. So we always had high quality food, and food was always really important in my family. And eventually my dad divorced my mom and opened Cafe Gratitude and Gracias Madre. So we're kind of like the vegan mafia, all jokes aside. Like, we own the largest swath of vegan restaurants as a family. Um, I'm not speaking for Cafe Gratitude or Gracias Madre in any way. I'm biologically related, but not business related, just for the record.
So they're vegan restaurants too. This is all in Southern California.
Yeah, Gracias Madre might be the most successful vegan restaurant in the history of ever. I mean, doing at the top of its game, doing 9, 10, 11 million dollars a year. So,
Wow.
and I mean,
And
I was doing 7 million a year in each store prior to second quarter of 2020.
you had 4 stores.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And this is all in where is this is in LA or north of
All in
LA or
L,
like
yeah, all in LA. And my farm was north of LA. I was growing all like a more large percentage of the food for the restaurants. We have a brewery. I brought all the grain and fed my cows off the farm. I mean, California should have loved me. I'm like literally the poster child. You should look up like vegan, organic chef, organic farmer employing 350 people, taking all my food waste and turning it to carbon neutral, no methane compost, and then growing it into new avocados. And so people can have avocado toast. Like, I'm your fucking hero, but they hate me because they hate everybody in California. Like, doing business in California is to basically give a huge percentage of your income to a government that hates you and make some part of your business illegal at all times. Like, at COVID, they gave us the outside, like, parklets, they call it. People are listening from all around, and I don't know how long
yeah.
they only were allowed to serve food outside. We were only allowed to serve food outside for 2+ years, with a brief stint of indoor dining allowed in there. So we're not talking here in Texas. It was like, yeah, I feel like I could only dine outside for 3 or 4 weeks. Like, that's what they tell me here in Texas. But in California, it was never ending. And then they didn't give anybody permission to have patio heaters or umbrellas outside. So you just would get fined for putting out patio heaters and umbrellas, but you weren't allowed to serve anybody inside.
Do, I mean, okay, so there's so many of y'all out there, restaurant owners, that had to deal with all this just BS. Do y'all have a sense? Was it? I mean, do you think that this was just unintended harm by uninformed or naive bureaucrats, or do you think this was a way to gain more control and centralized power with the government? I mean, why do you? It was
So,
very
Harry,
obvious what this was going to do.
I wish with every fiber of my being, I am a mother of 5 children. I wish with every fiber of my being that it was just gross incompetence.
Yeah.
But it was the greatest transfer of wealth in the history of the world. It was a massive centralization of industries that were going in the direction of centralization, but we're not centralized yet. Our food system, and I beg of every chef and restaurant owner on this podcast to recognize that we are 80% centralized in the food system, and you have the power to buy from not Cisco and Shamrock and UNFI, and that you have the power to buy from local farms, and you have the power. And I'm not saying you're never going to buy from Cisco or never going to buy from Shamrock. Of course, there's going to be things that you're going to get, and there's commodities that are going to come from far away. But like 80% of our meat is processed by 4 major companies. That is not safe for us, for all of humanity. That's not safe.
Wait,
70,
80% of our meat is produced by 4 companies
yes, sir.
here in the
Processed.
U.S.
Yes, sir. And so that's not safe. And we
Mm-hmm.
aren't even allowed to, like, if I wanted to sell you a cow, right now, you would have to buy the cow alive. And then I could take it to a local processor and then it would stamp do not sell, do not sell, do not sell. Or I would have to haul a cow to far away. I mean, I'm in Texas, so it's not that far. But I mean, I have a friend, AJ Richards. You should actually have AJ on your podcast. He started a company called From the Farm, and he's basically trying to help chefs and consumers buy direct from farmers. And he's
Mm.
created a software that's similar to a Uber or something like that, but it's connecting all these farmers and the needs. But right now, there's this mass centralization of our food and specifically meat processing. And so there's some stuff that we can do. The Massey, Thomas Massey has brought the Prime Act, and if that could pass, that would say that, you know, certain farmers could process their own meat or process at local processors and sell it locally so that you have that local food system is still intact. Because imagine that they're making it so I'm not allowed to harvest a cow or have a local processor harvest a cow and sell it to you. It's only considered food if it goes through one of these big conglomerate situations. And it's harder and harder to get USDA certification on your processing facility. And it costs millions of dollars to get compliant and all of that. And then, and, and then when you do find a place, they're struggling because I have a local processor here. But I mean, they are so over like worked and understaffed, and the margins are so small because these big conglomerates can just squeeze the prices out of everybody. And so we really, really, really want to prioritize local food and local food systems, because something could happen one day and you're going to want to know who has a dairy cow, where can I go buy a gallon of milk, where can I go get a dozen of eggs, and where can I go buy, you know, a beef round and cut up some carne asada. Like, you're going to want to know that if something happens. And if nothing ever happens and I'm just a crazy conspiracy theorist, like, what is the harm in like really supporting local farmers and eating hamburger that came from one cow instead of like 1,000?
Well, I listen, you're not a crazy conspiracy theorist. The more centralized things become, the more fragile we are to disruption of those things. We we have learned that before, and we'll learn that probably the hard way again. So it is very easy to chase inexpensive, cheap products, not know where these commercial feedlot cattle. I mean, yeah, if people that watch and see how those are treated, you probably don't want to eat meat because you look at that and you think, if this is how, this is what my
Yeah,
meat's
I mean,
coming from, I'm not interested.
I posted a picture yesterday of this cow, Lila. She's a dairy cow and she's out on grass right now. And everybody was like, how long will you allow her to live? And I was like, I don't know, 14 years. She's a dairy cow. Like, I don't know. It's a weird, vegans are so concerned about animal welfare that they're missing the middle. Like, there has to be a middle where, like, oh, on a regenerative farm eating only organic grain with all, and guardian dogs and veterinary care and all the brushes and everything that a cow could ever want, then you're going to like discount all of that because in 14 years she may become ground beef. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I feel like I think that vegans and regenerative farmers should be partners in that. We're both wanting less death, more um humane conditions for the animals, better soil, better food, whole foods, all of these things. We should be partners. And then if we eradicate the consolidated feedlot system, then if vegans and regenerative farmers want to battle it out, then let's kick that can down the road. But as long as the powers that be can keep us arguing over the ridiculous, then we're not standing together and saying, you know what, I don't want any more poison in my food. You know what, I want whole foods that are not ultra processed, and I want whole foods not ultra processed to be subsidized the same as corn and soy and ultra processed foods. Like, if we're going to subsidize, I don't really believe in subsidies, but since we're spending billions on subsidies, it's not fair. Why would a raw beet that is just a raw beet pulled out of the ground cost more than sugar refined from beets? Like something's wrong here. Like there's those subsidies that are pushing us towards poison, sugar, diabetes, water, also known as soda. These things are not in our best interest. And so if we could stop fighting amongst ourselves, I'm paleo, I'm keto, I'm vegan, I'm vegetarian, I'm carnivore, and we could just say like, you know what? I'm like for conscious eating of whole foods, like whole foods. Like when I read the ingredients, I remember what they look like growing. I've seen them growing. I've planted them. How about that? How about those be the things we're fighting about? Because
Oh, I love this so much. Okay. Like I said, I've got 1,000 things I want to ask you. Okay. You grew up a vegan. All right.
yes, sir.
Um,
I still don't eat meat. I've never
okay.
eaten.
This is where, so you still don't eat meat. No, do you, okay. I'm just a couple of things. One is, do you have to take B12 supplements? How do you get B12 as a vegan?
Um, well, I eat dairy. I'm not a vegan anymore. I have dairy cows on my farm. We have eggs on my farm. Was part of my whole journey. Um, but I cook regularly with nutritional yeast, and so nutritional yeast has a lot of B12 in it, and
Okay.
we use that as a seasoning. I will continue to use that as a seasoning at even it because it gives that umami, so it has naturally occurring mono, whatever MSG is, but the naturally occurring version of it that doesn't change your DNA.
Okay.
So cooking addictive food is our job, right, as chefs. And so you're always trying to find that balance of fat and sugar and salt and spice and acid to bring people back.
Yeah.
And I think that nutritional yeast is a good tool for that. So I believe that I am getting B12 from nutritional yeast, but I have taken I'm 46 years old this week and I'm still breastfeeding. I have a one less than 1 years old baby that I had last year. And I have had a baby every 2 years since I was 37. So I have 5 kids back to back to back to back to back. Four biological kids and one adopted. And so I say that to say that at some point I decided, well, if I believe that it's good to take um my own placenta and like freeze dry that and dry it, and I believe that there's like value, so I started taking some supplements that are essentially the female parts of a cow, um the female organs of a cow, and also liver, beef liver, freeze dried. So I do take that, and I do eat raw milk, raw kefir, raw yogurt, raw cheese that we make here on the farm. So I think I'm doing fine. I'm clearly still popping out babies like they're Tic Tacs. So
Yeah. Right. What? Okay. Um, oh boy, I wish I could get my hands on some of that raw milk and that raw kefir. It's hard. I actually bought some raw kefir.
uh-huh.
So I'm in North Carolina. All right.
Is that legal there, or you could go to jail for that?
Well, you can go to Sprouts and buy it, and it literally says,
For
for
dog.
animal use only as a topping on dog food. And I that's what I buy, and I drink that. And I mean, it's there with, like, they know why people are buying it. It's not in like a special, it's not in the dog food section. It's in the section with regular kefir and milk and all that stuff. It's just
I
that
know
they've got
I'm
that.
thinking about, we can't bring dairy to at once we're working on our grade A dairy permit here, but I won't be able to allow to bring dairy to the farmer's market unless people bought it in advance. But I was thinking maybe some people would want some dairy for their dog that they didn't buy in advance. And so I've had the consideration of starting a pet food section of my farmer's market booth here in Texas because I do think that dogs love raw milk.
Th they do, and they love raw meat, and they love, things that we could get into the whole conversation about what to feed dogs, but,
But
uh,
I'm being sarcastic, but that is a way that we all work around.
you work around that, yeah. Well, Okay, so how come you haven't eaten meat?
Interesting question. It doesn't occur as food to me. I've never eaten meat. And so I never smell it and I'm never like, that smells delicious. And it's interesting. I have two vegetarian kids and three meat eating kids.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about your adopted son because I went and found his Instagram and I followed him a little bit, so I want to get into that too.
Yeah,
But
follow Osmar's journey on Osmar underscore journey on Instagram. He's extraordinary. Uh, but I I would say that I am a blood type, and I think that it's pretty easy for me to be a vegetarian. And it doesn't occur. I was raised vegetarian. I never ate any meat. I never, and so it doesn't look like I don't eat eggs either, like scrambled eggs, like oh, but people love scrambled eggs, but I make them into other stuff and I make frittata multiple times. I have guests here at the ranch who just made two huge full trays of frittata this morning, one with wild boar and one with
mm,
just veggies and mushrooms, but it's just not it's just probably what I'm accustomed to eating, and I will maybe change that. I'm my husband is pushing and pushing. He keeps giving me little his trick is he's a chef, and so he's always like, I made this thing and I don't think I seasoned it right, honey.
just try it.
You're a better chef than me. Can you just try the sauce and see if it needs any more salt? Hey babe, I made this there's a lemongrass bone broth down there. Can you go try it, honey? It just needs something. And I think he thinks he's sly and I don't know what he's doing. He's like, if I could be as good at seasoning things as you.
That's funny. Yeah, a lot of times we men think we're being sly and it's like so obvious. Well, okay, so okay, fair enough. So maybe you will, maybe you won't. I was wondering because one of the things I want to ask you about, which I've always found this to be very fascinating, is and I've seen this in some of the backlash. Like I've watched some of the, responses that you've gotten over the last week or two. Like
Mhm.
Sean Baker posted something that somebody was like just ripping you. And oh, you obviously only care about the money. You don't care about animals. You're going to kill animals. The question I'm always, it's like this cult
I
of,
didn't even
like,
see that thing that Sean.
oh God, this guy was like giving you the bird and, like F this, F that. And here's
I
the
wish
thing.
I would have had because I like reposting these things because people are, I like to just say, I'm not gonna hang my head down in shame. I reposted all the protesters in front of my restaurant going, tradition is no excuse. Regenerative agriculture is no excuse. Uh, whatever. All the protesters in front of the restaurant. I reposted there and was like, thank you for your commitment to the animals.
Well, okay, so let's talk about the animals because you have people that are like, I'm a vegan because of animal welfare. Let's talk about that a little bit, and let's
Yeah,
talk about what.
I'm totally open to talk about that.
Well, what when you say that, then you're really saying I don't want cows to die, but let's educate people a little bit about what happens when you do massive plots of land and you monocrop and you till. Like, are animals dying in that process?
Millions. And I don't know where at what size people decide is an animal.
Right.
So because I
Is
see
a
these
mouse
things
an animal or
about
like?
because I see these things, it's like crop death is like 79 billion or something a year. I don't know what it is exactly, but it's a huge number. And I say, I'll even take it further than that. Of yes, crop death happens. Cows get ground, I mean, not cows, baby deer get ground up into the combine harvester. Uh, ground squirrels get trapped and killed or poisoned. The humane way is actually to trap and kill them, but the poisoned way is like what most people do. Honestly, the truth is, um, and the foxes get chopped up, and rabbits get chopped up, and all. I mean, and here's the thing: whenever any ecosystem is out of balance, there becomes a huge amount of something. When we bought our farm in California, the river was going, but they had taken out all the trees and everything, and they were going to replant it in avocados, and then they did it, and they just kept spraying with Roundup, and it was just like a fallow pace of land for a long time, but the river was there. So toads upon toads upon toads, just at nighttime, you would walk outside and toads would be jumping off the roof of the porch, I mean, everywhere. And you couldn't drive without killing a bajillion toads. Now, once we brought the ecosystem into, I didn't have to kill all those toads. They just got killed by everything, just running over them, I mean, thousands. But once we brought the ecosystem into balance, there was like a few toads under a rock, like a normal thing. But when we do these things where we only grow one thing in huge masses, we get huge masses of some weird animal that on accident because no predators, no this, no that. That happens. And then those all get poisoned and killed. So that's the one thing. But 25% of life on the planet lives in the top 8 inches of topsoil. So I want you to imagine in the top ground, anywhere, that's the healthiest ground, hopefully, that we have. And in that, there's macro life, micro life, there's fungi, there's bugs, and there's viruses, there's bacteria, and there's, all different kinds of sizes of tiny little bugs to bigger to, ground squirrels and voles and stuff like that. 25% of life on the planet lives in that topsoil. Now, here's the interesting thing of that microbiology, the micro life, 70% of that is compatible with the human gut. And so the way human beings have replenished their immune system for all of time, and not just human beings, cows and buffalo and deer and sheep and everybody, we have eaten of the soil.
Ruminants.
So
So you're talking about 8 inches of soil. That's where the abundance of life
25% of all
lives.
life on
And
the planet lives in that top
okay.
soil. Now, you asked earlier about B12. Interesting, in feedlot situations, we need to supplement B12 to the animals too. Do you know that animals are getting B12 from soil? So soil is actually where it is coming, and then we have to give them mineral blocks and we have to give them B12 in a feedlot situation because, and if I have my animals not on pasture, they have a mineral block. That is, but when they're on pasture, they don't need that because the soil has all of these things in it that they're getting. So the microbiology in soil is compatible with the human gut. Cow poop is like the perfect bomb of life for that life in the topsoil. And so there's this circle that has existed, bovine on grass, for a very, very long time on every continent except for New Zealand, some one continent. But this has happened. And so the reality is we are meant to eat of the soil. And we can all remember a grandmother, a great grandmother, whoever the last person you can remember growing food for you and your family. They would cut a cabbage out of the garden. They would rinse it off with the hose or the sink and chop it up, make sauerkraut or make it into make sweet and sour cabbage with some bacon bits or whatever, and that microbiology got into your body. That is how we would pick berries and we would eat them. Me and my brother used to eat strawberries, right? Wild strawberries off the side of the road. That's how the microbiology of life got into humans. We are desecrating the topsoil. The climate alarmists will tell you we have 50 harvests left. I would say we should probably add to that because they love to be alarmist. And so we might
Yeah.
want to double check their numbers. But I'll tell you what, soil is in deep trouble and microbiology is in deep trouble. And the genetically modifier people of the world are making genetically modified microbiology, and people are fucking with stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We have the power to be the apex species and to make a difference and to rebuild the soil. It's not like the soil is blowing away. We can't do anything about it. We can. But when you till and till and till, microbiology of the soil can only live on a living root. That's how it lives, on a living root. So when you till and leave it field fallow, you're killing the majority of the microbiology. Imagine if it was a coral reef, and then imagine tilling through a coral reef every year and see how long could all that interconnected life continue to live. Well, that's what we're doing. And so one of the main tenets of regenerative agriculture is to have less tillage or no till or low till. And that is to ensure that top soil is healthy. But that's not just so that people can eat meat. That's because of that topsoil is the building blocks for everyone's immune system, every animal, every human. That's the building blocks for our immune system, our gut health. And our gut health is very closely connected to our brain health. And so
Hmm.
people would say I'm a crazy conspiracy theorist, but I'll tell you that I think mental illness is out of control because we are sterilizing our guts by eating grain that's been sprayed with Roundup every day. And Roundup is sterilizing. They say it doesn't hurt the human. It doesn't hurt the human. But the other 50% of us, the microbiology that keeps us alive, all has a shikimate pathway, so it kills all of that. So we're sterilizing ourselves, and then we have no gut microbiology, so then our brain function is bad, and then we have mental health issues, and that leads to so many other things. And it's all connected, all the way goes back to the soil. And so I don't know what the question was, but the soil, I think everybody's main concern should be the soil. And vegans are so concerned about one cow dying, and there's 7 billion animals are dying in crop death. And then the vegan would say, oh, well, it's mostly animals eating that food. Okay, but if humans were eating that food because we were no longer eating animals, then it would be because humans were eating it. But I assert, I want to take it a step further. But if we were eating grass fed, grass finished food, then there would be way less crop death because we wouldn't be feeding corn and soy to animals.
We we went on a RV trip from Waxhaw, North Carolina to Boulder, Colorado a few years ago. My family of 5. I thought it would be a good idea. Um, lot of interesting times with the family and cooped up in this RV. I was like Clark Griswold. I thought it was great. My wife, my kids were like, "Get me out of this thing." But when we went through Kansas, I kept thinking we're like driving through Kansas, and all you see all day long on I-70, this straight shot line right through Kansas, is soybeans and corn for miles and miles and miles and miles. And I'm going, how can this possibly be healthy? Okay, so and again, you mentioned a couple of times, like, you may sound like a crazy conspiracy theorist. So I'm right there with you. Sometimes I'm like, well, maybe I'm just but I'm looking at that in my mind. I'm going, this doesn't look like a scene of abundant health of these foods that we're going to feed. This looks like somebody's probably making a whole hell of a lot of money off of these high yield, cheap monocrops. This soil can't be healthy. That we've destroyed a lot of land to put all this stuff here. It's probably subsidized. It is.
For sure.
And how could this be the healthy way to be? My guess is there are a lot of very big companies making gobs of money off of this. And then there's a lot of naive consumers that are being told, like, oh, this is a healthy way to eat or whatever. And I always kind of look at things, Molly, like I talk to my kids about this, like there's sheep, there's wolves, and there's sheepdogs. And the wolves know what they're doing. And they like you equate that to people. Like there's people that know exactly what they're doing, right? And they know how to manipulate people at scale. And one of the terms I like is moist robots. Like we're really programmable at scale for people that know what they're doing and that understand how to make massive amounts of money. And then you kind of take sheep who are unawares and are easy to program, and you convince them that what you're doing is right or whatever, and then you can make a lot of money off them. And you need sheepdogs like you who are out there going, hold the phone. Like, I'm a thinking person, and I'm starting to learn as I grow that even though I did something my entire life, and even though I still eat that way, that doesn't necessarily mean that that is the way and the one true way and the healthiest way. And by the way, I'm starting to realize here that actually we need cattle. I mean,
We
one of the
need
most interesting.
cattle. Like we literally need cattle. And it's a symbiotic relationship that's been developed over time. It benefits both. What would cattle's purpose be in this world that we live in now if they weren't being eaten? Like literally, what would their purpose be? What would they provide?
Exactly. Scenery. Like, oh, look at the pretty cows. Like, no, well, a few years ago, I watched Alan Savory on TED Talks. And have you watched his TED Talk? Do you know
No.
him?
Have you watched Graham State's TED Talk? That's my favorite regenerative
No,
exercise.
I will. I mean, no, I will. Alan just it blew me away because they're taking desert and turning it into grasslands just by basically carefully bundling and herding cows and letting the cows poop and then trample on it and it gets you
It's
know
so awesome, and it
and
happens
then
so fast. People, this is not something that my grandchildren's grandchildren will see the benefits of. Like, this is something that happens so fast.
Absolutely. Well, see, and Alan's cool. He here's a guy who says, "Look, I made like a massive mistake back in Africa, and I thought that I thought we had to kill all these elephants to avoid because they were causing the desertification, and I was wrong. And so instead of like pointing fingers or not admitting, he went, I blew this. I was wrong. I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to figure this out. And then they started realizing just quite the opposite. We actually need these ruminant animals, and we need them to poop, and we need them to smash it into the ground. And like you said, it's this bomb of like life that gets pushed into the topsoil, and then take an area that's all sand, and next thing you know, within a couple of decades or less, it's all grasslands. And so anyway, I admire very much your look. I admire your willingness to be constantly trying to learn and grow and say, okay, maybe I wasn't completely right about this, so I'm going to shift. Like it's hard for a lot of people to do that, and we get sort of tied up in these like cults and like veganism like to the extreme can become like this religion, and so can carnivores. Like you said earlier, like people just get so obsessed with this, like this is the way and any deviance from this
And
way
I
is
mean,
wrong. And
I would say that veganism and politics are like up there with the highest. Like, if you identify as Democrat, and you identify as that D, or you identify as that V, as vegan, it's very hard um to say, I don't think this makes sense anymore. Like, these facts have been presented to me and now I don't agree. It's very, very hard. And I think people dug in many ways because of tribal consciousness, and
mhm.
it lost their sense of individual logic. Like, wait, let me just look. I'm just going to look at this from this other angle over here. And I didn't mean to look at COVID from this other angle over here. I had just never been vaccinated, so I wasn't about to jump on some random thing that just came out of nowhere. Like, I wasn't into the ones that had been around for a long time. So I was definitely not going to be into this new thing. And people went crazy. People that I've known my whole life asked me if you still care about humanity, didn't want to talk to me anymore. And I mean, people I've known since kindergarten, and still don't have, the love is not as present between us, even if they've kind of, you know, came back around to be normal. We're not close like we were for 30 years, 40 years of a friendship. And so it's interesting is that we identify as things so much. And if you say, like, well, I don't agree with that, all of a sudden it means something about everything else about you. And that's, veganism is like one of those original cancel culture things. And
Yeah.
I know people that are publicly vegan and they secretly eat meat when nobody's looking. I know people
Oh my gosh.
hide, when we, even here on the ranch, we serve meat and we serve vegan things, and we have retreats and stuff. I know people that are hiding meat in their bowl from their partner, like from their friends, from their family. This is, people should not be shamed. I mean, people have been posting stuff wishing my children would die. Imagine that I'm like, I'm going to serve meat, like the highest quality, best for the animal situation at my restaurant, because every restaurant, every listener out here has a restaurant. They have a vegan option on their menu because they're trying to get part of the market share that I used to monopolize. Well, okay, then I'm also going to try to use my newfound knowledge to get a different market share. That's a totally logical response to the information that I've learned as a business owner. And to do that, and people are like, I want your children to die. I want you to die. I hope you get cancer. Well, that's crazy talk.
Maybe they should eat a little meat. I don't know. Maybe it's golly.
I
So
posted one thing. She was like, I hope your kids die of a slow, painful death. Wow.
that's mental illness. And, but listen, okay. Well, they probably eat a lot of highly processed. There's eating, look, there's a big difference between eating crops that you grow and and they're not sprayed with pesticides and you're close to you've harvested this yourself and you eat that type of vegan, and then there's like you can say you're vegan but you're eating these highly processed, densely packed, high margin crap food. I mean, like that Impossible Burger, like, I
I've
mean,
never
come
eaten
on, like
I've never eaten an Impossible Burger. I've never eaten a Beyond. So I've never eaten meat. And I mean, I had a little bite like when I was 12 of chicken and a hamburger just to see what the fuss was about. But but I've also never eaten a Beyond Burger. I've never eaten an Impossible Burger. We're calling our Buffalo Burger at the new restaurant What's Possible.
love it.
Poke fun at the Impossible Burger, because what is possible with man and bovine on grass is extraordinary, and it is beneficial to all life on the planet. And if people really cared about life on the planet, we'd be talking about chemicals, we'd be talking about
Yes.
engineering, we'd be talking about fluoride, glyphosates, like endocrine interrupters in every shampoo, conditioner, all of that. But people don't care. We don't really care. We just want to at each other. And so I'm just like, I'm not gonna get into your I'm gonna do what I think is best. And so that I know that I fought like hell for my son to be able to procreate. Like the average sperm of a man in 2040 is 0 at our current trajectory. So while everybody's screaming about overpopulation, we are literally being depopulated by chemicals. And so I'm not going to scream back at the vegans. I'm going to quietly make the choices that I think are best in hopes that my 4-year-old and 9-year-old can reproduce like normal people and not have to carry some fetus around in a, I don't know, robotic womb or whatever the situation is going to be in that time.
We are depopulating and we got a big problem. Our demographics are looking really bad right now. We're not at replacement. So I agree with that. And there's so many things that it's like the attention's turned to these silly spats about things, and we're just, the elephant in the room's not even being addressed. So, well, let's talk about crops and chemicals and sprays and what that does to a lot of the food that is being consumed by us. Um, and
It,
and I also go ahead.
oh no, go ahead. What were you going to say? Finish the
Well,
point.
I want to get into one of the things I don't want to miss is to explain what does regenerative farming mean, and when did you get into that, and when did you start to realize, wait a minute, beef, cattle, ruminants are an important part of this equation.
Yeah, so I listened to that Graham State talk, and in 2013, I want to say, and I was totally inspired.
His name
And
is Graham,
Sate, Saite, I think.
and was it a TED Talk?
Yeah. And
Okay, so Graham Sate TED Talk. Okay, cool.
I thought to myself, wow, this is amazing what he's talking about. Soil, plants, carbon cycling, small water cycles. Like, why is nobody I was just going through life, driving my hybrid, drinking my fucking almond milk latte, bringing my bags to the grocery store. Like, oh, this doesn't seem like we're really doing enough here, folks. And I thought, what? Am This guy has like a major solution, but I still was in my vegan mindset. Like, well, I don't have to kill cows. I don't have to kill cows. Let me see what I can do without killing cows. So I bought the farm, and we started bringing all the compost to the farm, and then the compost was like not breaking down that fast. And my dad was like, well, you need cow poop. You need some animal feces to set it off. So my dad gave me this cow, Una. I still have Una. She's awesome. She's a bug eye. Her eyes look like they're gonna pop out of your head all the time. But Una had a baby. She was bred already when I got her from my father. And I thought, I'm sitting here, I'm breastfeeding my now 7-year-old daughter. She was less than one. And Una has this huge udder, and we're milking it off like into the gutter because it's too much for the baby cow. The baby cow can't take all 4 quarters empty, and we don't want her to get mastitis. And this is my first like, whoa, this is like not make sense. I'm buying Tetra packs of oat milk or almond milk or soy milk from Costco, and I'm breastfeeding my baby, and I'm thinking my breast is best and all the microbiology, and it's fighting all the immune system from the environment. And I'm like, well, that cow's milk is doing the same thing. I want my older son who's not breastfeeding anymore drinking that. I don't want him drinking soy milk. I don't want him drinking oat milk with Roundup in it. And so it was a series of these like little things like, oh, well, good compost needs animal manure. And then we're buying fertilizer for my crops and we're all organic. And I'm like, okay, and I'm buying fertilizer and I'm reading the ingredients. It's like blood meal, bone meal, and chicken poop. Okay, well, that's all coming out of the consolidated feedlot system. So I'm like, well, I need more animals because I need more poop to grow my vegetables, but I don't want to be getting that CAFO stuff. So I'm getting more, I get all these sheep and to graze through the vineyard and through the hop yard because we have a brewery, so we're growing hop. And then a dog kills all the sheep in one night. Doesn't even eat a bite, just like straight sport, kills
Ooh.
all my sheep. And I'm crying like a baby. And my husband just runs into action, gets a gun, shoots them. There's like their necks were pulled out, their guts, but they were still alive. And my husband shoots them, harvests everything, and makes 15 buckets of lamb meat. And he calls everyone he knows. And family after family shows up and picks up a bucket of lamb meat and goes home and salts it and waters it and washes it and vacuum seals it, whatever they did. And I mean, we still in that town where we used to live in, people will be like, oh, thank you. Like we'll see them at the juice place or see them at the taco place and they'll say, oh, thank you for the borrego. And this made a huge difference for people. It was like a huge amount of calories that went out into the community. And every white person that I called, like everybody that I called, they're like, oh no, the trauma, we can't eat any meat with trauma in it. And I remember thinking as a vegan, like, oh, it's weird. I think there's trauma transporting cows to slaughterhouses and blah, 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 blah. But anyways, nobody wanted to eat the trauma meat. But the Latino community was super grateful and it fed so many people. And I remember thinking, wow, I was just going to throw that in a hole in the ground. And my husband salvaged millions of calories, probably. I don't know. It was 8 sheep. They all got killed. And the dogs did not take a single bite. Not if they just, it was all for sport. And I remember in that moment thinking, wow, nature is far crueler than humanity ever will be. And so there was
Mm.
this, and I was doing all the practices. So I was inspired from the TED Talk. So we got the sheep, we got the goats, we got the cows. And in 2.5 years, I never had to buy fertilizer again. And I never had to buy any pesticides because I had brought uh, cohesion into the environment and I brought diversity into the environment. And so where we were unable to grow things because there was just so many bugs and so many aphids and so when we brought balance to the soil, the immune system of every plant was stronger and therefore everything was able to grow. And I never had to put fertilizer again, like with the exception of grazing the animals in between row crops and adding manure that was from animals that are in pens. And that was it. That was, and we use the scraps from the restaurant mixed with the animal manure. And, if it was the birthing moms or whoever was not out on pasture, we'd collect up that manure and mix it. And that's it. And I never bought another bit of fertilizer. And so on 17 acres last year, we did 540 something thousand dollars of produce on 17 acres. That's extraordinary numbers. Now, I'm not saying that we made a ton of money because there's a lot more labor involved in how I was doing stuff and there was learning. and I felt like it's my job to learn and my restaurants were paying me. And so it was okay for me to lose a little bit of money. But the learning that I had was if you can bring healthy soil into balance, everything else will thrive. And the next thing is now to learn how to do things with less labor. And that's, uh, or train the consumer to pay the real cost of food. Right now, our food is so subsidized that we don't pay, we're not used to paying what food should actually cost based on the current labor prices in any given market.
All right, y'all, it is time for a little mid episode break. We're going to talk about Kickfin. Thousands of restaurants, bars, and breweries use Kickfin to tip out their employees instantly. No cash required. With Kickfin, tips go directly to your employees' bank of choice the second their shift ends. It's a really simple solution to a really big problem because if you're still paying out credit card tips in cash, it's costing you. Time consuming bank runs and cash counting take managers away from work that matters. Cash is hard to track, which leads to accounting headaches, and it creates the perfect opportunity for theft, human error, and compliance issues. Bottom line, there's never been an instant secure way to pay out tips until Kickfin. It's an easy to use software that sends real time, cashless tip payouts straight to your employees' bank accounts 24/7, 365. Kickfin gives managers hours back in their day, makes reporting a breeze, and protects your business from risk. Most importantly, employees love it. Restaurants can have Kickfin up and running overnight. Employees can enroll in seconds. No hardware, no contracts, no setup fees. Visit kickfin.com for a personalized demo. See how restaurants across the country are digitizing tips with Kickfin. All right, that's what they asked me to say, so I say it, and it tells the story very well, but I like to add this in. We referred a customer that we know and love very well, Sup Dogs, to Kickfin. Sup Dogs has been a customer for a super long time. Trust them very much with their opinion on these types of tools. They started using Kickfin. I asked Brett, the owner, recently how it's going. He said, Kickfin is perfect. It's going great. Exactly what we were hoping for. So there you go. Kickfin.com, y'all. Check them out. It's an interesting thing because you look at the type of food you're talking about and the cost that it comes at. I look at it like an investment. Like you're not sick, probably ever, I'm going to guess. Rarely. I
I don't
mean,
get sick very often, no.
right. So you're not buying medicines, you're not going to the doctor, you're not on Medicaid. I mean, like the cost of eating poorly, and I do very much agree with the gut brain. Uh, we have a
It's an
massive,
untold cost that people don't know about. Like
right.
they are not present to that cost.
It's hard to get people to think beyond the present and think long and think that the extra time, effort, energy, and money it takes to eat, quality whole foods that haven't been doused with antibiotics or haven't been covered with um, glyphosate or things that make them cheap and easy to grow. That sure it costs less to buy, but if you we need to get people to understand that what's going into your gut absolutely affects your mental health in so many ways, not just your physical health. So now we have people that are going around physically unfit, mentally unfit, and of course, the big conspiracy part of all this, when you really get into it, is like it's sort of like big food and big pharma are kind of in bed together, just keeping everybody
That I don't even
sick and
think
just.
that's not even a conspiracy. Bayer owns Monsanto. Literally, the same people that are making us sick are the same people that are selling us the medication. I'll give you an example where it's so clear. So in 1991, my husband's indigenous he's Zapotec from South Mexico, by Huatulco is like the biggest kind of touristy place that people might know about. He lives in a tiny indigenous village, like 45 minutes by car from Huatulco, but there was no road to his village until 1991 when Hilton wanted to start building hotels in Huatulco on the beaches, they needed access to the oil refineries on the other side of my husband's village. And so up until that point, my husband's father, to the day he died a couple of months ago, only rode a horse for transportation. He never had a car because until 1991, there was no way to get there by car, only by horse. And so prior to 1991, diabetes, cancer, heart attacks, like not happening. And we were just there for a memorial a couple weeks ago or a week ago. And I told my husband, all the women wear dresses because it's indigenous culture. They don't wear pants. And so I could see everyone's ankles, and you could see so many women that were not much older than me or my same age with the black, those diabetes marks that you get on your ankles um, from the circulation or whatever's happening when you get those, lots of people with diabetes,
Mm-hmm.
swelling and the
Yep.
black marks on their feet and on their ankles. And I brought it up to my husband and he goes, I know. And nobody had diabetes before the road got here. He said, I can remember a time where we knew one person who had cancer, and his grandmother died in the earthquake, I guess, some years ago in her 90s. His grandfather died very recently in his late 90s. And there's still a lot of the older folks that are dying, but my husband's father's generation, who was in his 60s, they had a bunch, there's like 20 brothers between multiple women in different villages, and they're already starting to die. And the 67, my husband's father just died of a heart attack, 67 years old, or a stroke. They don't do autopsies there, but you can
Yeah.
see that what's happening is that older generation that ate the food the majority of their life, without access to the road. So now my husband said when he grew up, people would come through with their cart from wherever, and there would have some rice or beans or things to sell, fish and stuff, and people would buy it and whatever. But once the road got there, there's Coca-Cola in every little bodega store. There's a huge wall of chips, Takis, and all the Doritos and everything like that. And there's a small shelf, not more than 18 inches, that has the traditional foods on it. And no vegetables, like you have to drive somewhere to get vegetables. No vegetables are being trucked in or anything like that at every store that's in that little village. And there's advertisements. Coca-Cola has paid artists to draw on the side of multiple people's houses in this tiny village. There's no billboards. So there's just like a
Mm.
house that someone has their front. If you've been to a developing nation, you've seen these where it's like a store in the front of someone's house. And multiple houses have either a beer company or Coca-Cola drawn across the front of the house as an advertisement that an artist has been paid by Coca-Cola to do that. And what is the cost of that is that people are dying of these diseases that they were not dying of pre 1991. And it's crazy. My husband's mother's electric bill is 110 pesos, and a Coca-Cola is 100 pesos. So it's also crazy expensive for people.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
A Coke costs the same as an electric bill for the month?
Well, I mean, she has a very modest life and house, but yes.
Uh, yeah. The
But so that's an example of how, if you're eating in the indigenous way, or, and you don't have to say it, if you're eating in your environment, let's just say, like eating
mm-hmm.
of your environment and growing food in your environment, which is the way that my husband was raised, many of these diseases don't exist that we are now plagued with. I went to the doctor not so long ago. Why did I never go to the doctor? Why did I had a miscarriage and I went to the hospital. It was a Sunday. I couldn't get in touch with my midwife. I went to the hospital because I was worried if there was something. I was having pain and I was worried if something was um like stuck or something like that. So I just wanted to ultrasound and then leave the hospital. And they were like, "What medication are you on the intake?" And I was like, I'm not on any medication. And they said, what do you mean you're not on any medication? And I was like, I'm not on any medication. They said, how old are you? And I said, 45 or 44 is before I had my last kid. And they said, we never see people in their mid 40s that are on no medication at all. And I thought that was very interesting. And I also just got new health insurance and they made me do my blood test a second time because I came out in the 99 like ultra platinum whatever. And she was like, I don't know. I mean, by looking at her metabolically, she's like a little overweight. And I just had a baby like a couple weeks before. So I was definite. I mean, I'm still have baby weight on me, but I was definitely overweight to some degree. And but they did it again and I came out in the 99 per like the highest score you could get on the life insurance. Um, whatever. And I would say it's not even about meat or not meat. It's about not processed foods. It's about eating whole foods in their whole
Yeah.
form and,
Let's
and not eating junk.
let's talk about something that's been a real interesting topic over the last few years, starting to get a little bit more attention, is seed oils. Now, this is an interesting one because the overwhelming majority of restaurants everywhere cook with seed oils.
Yep.
And there's begun to be a debate about, whether seed oils might be, the source of a lot of our autoimmune issues or health issues, or certainly contribute to that. So I'm curious about that and what y'all cook in your restaurants.
So we have been cooking with uh rice bran oil up until this transition. And this was a hard pill for me to swallow because I've been saying that this is healthier for a lot. I've been believing that rice bran oil has a higher flash point, blah, 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 blah.
Rice bran oil is what I think Chipotle cooks with rice bran oil. That's part of their, why they claim it's a healthier thing. But okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And so, I had at the time I did the research, and that's what I believe to be true. Uh, I would say that seed oils, with the exception of like sesame seed oil, which is not very processed at all, um, are highly processed. And basically they were byproducts. Cottonseed was a byproduct of the clothing industry, and um, what we call canola is literally a plant called the rape plant. Rapeseed oil does it.
Rapeseed oil.
But in order to process them, they become something that's literally not edible, and they're causing inflammation, and they're causing our no, what is this gland called?
Pineal.
Pineal gland to be calcified, and they are causing our vision to degrade more quickly. And there's a lot of evidence that shows that there is uh, no health benefits. And if you look at who started Crisco and how the Crisco started and how these different seed oil companies started, Crisco was originally a byproduct from something else, and it
Mm.
was for lube for auto cars, and then
Mm-hmm.
they needed another source, and so they started telling people it was better than lard for cooking.
They
But
also gave the American Heart Association a lot of money back in the day, a whole
oh,
lot.
a
When
ton.
the American Heart Association didn't have any money, this is like 50 or 60 or 70 years ago, but they gave them millions of dollars, and all of a sudden, Crisco's heart healthy.
Just like how
Coincidence?
Ozempic is
Ah,
the NAACP got paid to basically say that if states don't pay for Ozempic with state-funded healthcare, it's racism. But they are a lobby for Ozempic, and they're also a lobby for the soda industry, NAACP. And so any respect that I had for them over time and history, uh, my grandmother started the NAACP chapter for Plattsburgh, New York, but I've lost all respect when you're peddling soda. And Ozempic literally kills all the microbiology in your gut and paralyzes your gut, so you can't uptake any nutrients, so therefore you don't get fat, but you also are going to eventually die because you need the microbiology in your gut.
Listen, you mentioned the vaccines. Good for you. I caved. I didn't want to take the vaccine. I took the vaccine because I didn't have. I caved, and I'm mad at myself. I have a friend in the studio with me right now that's in the same boat. We were pretty pissed ourselves for falling for that. For the pressure around that. The Ozempic thing is so similar, which is, there's a guy. Have you ever heard of a guy named Nassim Taleb?
Mm-mm.
He wrote The Black Swan. He wrote a book called Anti-Fragile. And he talks about, if not from nature, the burden of proof is that it doesn't do harm. Not, well, so far we haven't shown that it does harm. No, 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 no. Like, you have to prove that it doesn't do harm, and you have to prove that for now, and you have to prove that for the long term. Well, with those vaccines, with Ozempic, and with a lot of things, like, you can't do that because we don't have the time to have done that. And so the burden relies very much on, if it is not something from nature, then you have to prove it does no harm. Otherwise, no. And I look at things very much that way. So that to me is rolling the dice on so many things, and it's such a high risk proposition. Sure, it's easy way to lose weight, but oh my goodness, I have so many reservations about the long term effects that could have. And we're just
I'm not,
like,
I'm like, I'm sure that it's uh not good. There's it it's not even really being sold. It's Ozempic is out of England, and they're not even selling it there. They're selling it here. They know that we are a culture that can fall for something that's we're so vain that we're willing to just risk everything for.
well, we're vain, and we also don't want to work hard for things. That's the thing. It's like, short term hard, long term good. Short term hard, long term good. Short term easy, long term bad. Right? It's easy to do that. Long term, that ain't going to be good. It's hard to change your diet, change your exercise regimen, and put in the work. But that's hard short term. But then the long term benefits that are really good. And there's that cartoon of, like, we've sent this around, some of my buddies and I have over the years, where it's like two lines. It's like two lines of people, and one's like, let's say 50 people long, and it says, like, give me a pill. And then the other line has one person in it. It says, change my lifestyle,
Yeah.
And it's like there's one person in the doorway of each one of, like, the window, and it's like everybody's just like, give me the pill, and there's like one person. It's like, no, I want to change my lifestyle. That's so indicative of our culture, unfortunately. So you're fighting the good fight. It's an uphill fight, and it's a hard one. But
But to finish the thing about the uh seed oils is I think that yes, we all are using seed oils in our fryer. We're all using seed oils in our restaurants. And I think it's time for us to rethink that. And so I'm going to do one fryer with tallow, and I'm doing research right now with that something acres. It's made out of fermented sugarcane, an oil made
mm,
out of fermented sugarcane. And so I'm trying that out. But I do think for the vegan fryer, so we're gonna have a vegan fryer and a meat fryer. So people will choose tallow or this sugarcane oil. And if the sugarcane oil doesn't work out, we'll probably continue with rice bran. Because I think it's the least of the evils. But I do think that we as restaurant owners have to not just look at our bottom line. And it's hard because we're in a business where there is no cushion. You could be doing everything right and only pulling 10% to the bottom line. And in this current
yeah,
world, with what the costs and inflationary costs of everything is. Like for example, insurance has pulled out of California, so many insurance companies that I'm in a predicament where insurance cost is growing like in a way that I can't keep up with. Our to-go ware cost is growing in a way that I can't keep up with. But let's say you're doing everything right and it's pre-2020, you might only be pulling 10% to the bottom line, 17% to the bottom line if you're doing great. Um, so it's hard to make these choices, and And I don't know, maybe the restaurant business is someone said to me, restaurants are dinosaurs. And I put up a post on Instagram the other day and I said, people are voting for their dollars and people don't vote for all vegan restaurants anymore. They're voting for eating at a restaurant with vegan options. And so I'm accommodating that vote that everybody's voted with their dollars by spreading out the market share. And people said, oh, well, it's not just vegan restaurant. I mentioned that 13 vegan restaurants have closed since the beginning of the year right around us in Los Angeles. And they said it's not just vegan restaurants. And it isn't just vegan restaurants. Like, I don't know what the pandemic did to people wanting to go out to eat. Like, I don't know if it became acceptable to give up the pussy without buying a meal first because we weren't allowed to go out. I don't know if people just don't want to get their hair done and don't want to put makeup on. I don't know what happened, but people are not going out to eat as much.
Well, yeah, so many
I
things
mean, like
to unpack
if
there.
for 2 years you're not allowed to go out, then Netflix and chill becomes like you're not a slut anymore. You can just do that, right? And so I'm just I'm joking, not joking. Like culturally, we
No,
change.
I mean, I think
Don't go out
there's
to
so
dinner.
much in our culture changed. I can't, oh gosh. I think that you add that to the already extreme amount of screen time people were spending, and it just got accelerated during COVID, and we've become lazy and less social, and you add to the fact, I mean, look, for 10, 12 years, money was basically free. So there's probably in some places an oversaturation of restaurants, and there's some natural contraction now that rates have gone. There's so many, like this confluence of all this stuff that happened. I mean, to me, there's nothing better than I feel like we need restaurants now more than ever because it's still one place where you can go. Like, I don't really like to go out and eat a whole lot. I really like to cook at home, and I have a pretty limited diet myself. And like we have this whole thing where my wife eats one way, my kids eat one way, I eat one way. It's ridiculous. But when we go out to a restaurant, it's like the one place where we're not distracted with whatever's going on at home and wanting to finish so we can go back to doing what we're doing. It's like where we can be present and put our phones away and have a real conversation and have somebody take care of us and provide good service and cook good food. So we're not thinking about that and we're just thinking about each other. So, I mean, that to me is just golden, and it's magical and it's important. Um, so I don't, restaurants have been around forever and they'll be around forever, but maybe there might be fewer than there were per capita, and particularly in places like where you were. But I mean, like, good grief, taxes and regulations and all that stuff they've done out in California there. Now, I have to ask am I clear? You've still got your 2 restaurants in California, but you now live in Texas, right?
I do.
Okay. When did you move to Texas?
Full time in December. We have Sovereignty Ranch here, so we have a restaurant on the ranch, like as farm to table as you could get. And let's say your family wanted a week of being present with each other and putting your phones down, you could rent a cabin or a house here and you could learn about regenerative agriculture. You could eat at the restaurant, have all food from the farm. And or if you wanted to have a family reunion, a wedding, a retreat, any of those things, we're going to do a recovering vegan retreat um, coming up
Hey,
here.
there's a lot of this. I mean, look, I kind of follow the carnivore stuff. I'm not a carnivore, but I'm more of I think your son posted one of these guys, Paul Saladino. I eat a lot of meat and I eat a lot of fruit. I don't really
My
dig on the
son's
veggies a whole lot.
That's my son's program. And then he does kefir and fermented vegetables.
I'm all that except for the fermented vegetables. Although I need to ask you about the fermented vegetables because I might be down with that. Tell me about fermented vegetables.
Well, what is the that some people can't tolerate that Paul's always talking about? There's a compound in green vegetables that is like forgot what it is, but there's some kind of compound in vegetables that's hard
Well, I
for
mean, there can be plant toxins and phytochemicals that some people can
phytochemicals.
have. Like I grew up eating just kind of I had all kinds of stomach issues my entire life, and I thought it was just normal. And then I went to this period where I started seeing some people that were like, "Look, just take a month and just eat meat, salt, and water and see what happens. And it changed my life, right? So like I just all of my uh all the issues with my digestive system went away. And then I started going, okay, well, what can I add back in? And there's certain things I would add back in that would cause problems and some that didn't. And I've just settled on my cousin has a beef cattle farm, and I buy a quarter of a cow from him. Grass fed cows, and buy a quarter of a cow from him every few months, and it's frozen vacuum pack cuts, and so I'm eating meat like
Does it say do not sell on them?
yeah, I mean yeah, and it's just once or twice a day. I eat meat, and then I eat a lot of fruit and bananas, and when I can get the raw kefir, I do. It's harder, like I said, you have to buy it as the pet food here, so I'll drink milk and eat a lot of eggs. Pasture
So the
raised wild eggs and stuff like that, and it's changed my life. I mean, I'm not saying it's for everybody, of course, but it's worked real well. It's for me. It's been where I've settled into. I'm 49 years old, and I feel better than I have like probably my whole life, with just like my whole digestive system and my physical health and my energy and everything else. Um, but I did listen to you in the last podcast talking about fermented foods and the benefit of those on our microbiome, and I've never really looked into that a lot. I don't know a lot about that, so I'm a little bit interested in learning about that.
so the fermented foods, those phytochemicals get eaten up by the bacteria,
By the bacteria.
and then you have the bacteria, and calories are still available. And so my son is really into kimchi, and we make raw cheeses here, which is another kind of fermented food. We make sourdough bread here. My husband makes sourdough bread every day. We collected a wild yeast off of the juniper berries here, and to make the sourdough bread. But we're into fermented foods. I think that you should want to be like 30-40% fermented foods, or at least fermented food adjacent. So a great way, like if you love to eat meat every day, I don't know how you feel about hot sauce, but fermented hot sauces are a great way to incorporate fermented foods if you're not into a pile of kimchi or sauerkraut on your hot dog or on your steak or whatever. I love to make fermented hot sauce. I just take lots of chili peppers, whole chili peppers, and put them in a crock with apple cider, raw apple cider vinegar that's still
Mm.
alive, and then salt. And I leave them to ferment for a long amount of time. And then you blend that up, and that's kind of shelf stable forever. But that will give you microbiology that you can add to anything that you're making or eating. And so I like fermented pickles, so not pickles that are not pickled and canned,
Mm.
but for pickles that are set out for 21 days or 15 days in a brine to ferment. All these are ways to incorporate fermented foods into your diet.
Love it. All right, I like that. I'm gonna give that a shot.
Excellent.
From Okay, good. Thank you. There's a guy. Well, first of all, tell us about your adopted son. I thought his story was really fascinating.
Uh, Osmar came as an unaccompanied minor during the Trump administration. He was reunited with his parents that were here in Los Angeles, and he started feeling really terrible sometime after he got here. And he was also, you know, so he was Googling, uh can food in the USA make you sick? And he was having high headaches, and I think high cholesterol, but he was young, and his mom had taken him to the doctor some, and um there was some health concerns. And so he started Googling about American food making you sick, and how the food in the USA might be different than it is in Guatemala. And he found Dr. Mark Hyman. And then Dr. Mark Hyman talked about regenerative agriculture. And he reached out to Mollie and John from The Biggest Little Farm, Apricot Lane, Apricot Acre, Apricot, that farm. And they said that he was too young to volunteer. And apparently he called somebody, not me, but my assistant or the volunteer coordinator or somebody. And we were like, oh yeah, we don't have an age limit. Probably should have an age limit on volunteers. And he took a $70 cab ride from downtown LA to the farm. And uh we had a like farm, we always did a big farm lunch one for the volunteers, and I could tell he was undernourished. He was like eating three full big plates of food and adding all toppings and whatever.
Mm.
And that day I asked one of my employees to drive him back to, so he didn't have to take a taxi. And then he called and asked, could he come the next weekend? But we don't have a volunteer day, but could he still come and volunteer? And he was like, he didn't speak very good English, but he did speak Spanish, and the guys that worked on the farm spoke Spanish. And so he said, oh, let me come. And so I think we worked it out that he drove with my food delivery truck back the next weekend, for Saturday, and spent the night and went back on Monday morning, I guess. But was the plan. And then Monday morning came about and he said, well, school is remote because of COVID, so I don't think I really need to go home. And I was like, well, you got to ask your parents. And he essentially never left. And then we eventually went to court and adopted him. And he loves regenerative agriculture. And the deeper, crazier part about all of it is that he was watching videos of me and he was feeling like totally connected. Like, I need to be like with that person's my family. Like, I need to be with that person. And he was thinking that, he's like, it's crazy. It's a random white lady in America. Why do I think that I need to be there? And years earlier, I had a crazy mushroom journey where I got kind of schooled about having an abortion when I was younger. And the mushrooms just kept showing me like the ripple effect of every human being and the interconnectedness of how we're all interconnected and every one of us makes a difference. And you can't pull one out and not have it change everything. And the mushrooms kept showing me this, and I was crying, and I'm like, what do you want? Like, what? I mean, I was a kid, like, I did what? I'm not gonna be pro-life. What do you want from me? And I kept showing me like fetuses going into old men, going into young men, into like the whole cycle of life. And then the voice kept saying, like, do you know better than me? And I was like, I don't know. I don't think so. No. And then the voice was like, do you believe in divinity and divine intelligence? And I said, yes. And then apparently out loud yelled, what is it you want? And then the voice said, promise you'll never do it again. And promise you never support anybody else financially, emotionally to do it. And I just kept this to myself. I didn't tell everybody. Was like deep compressing their mushroom journey the next day. I was like, yeah, it was good. It was about the land and farming, and it was great. Like, no, in my community, like, gonna say that I was like promised to be pro-life. That would be crazy, crazy. I was not gonna say that out loud. And so I years went by, and my ex-husband came into the restaurant one night and had a big upset and was drinking, and I had to call his roommates to come get him. And my ex-boyfriend, who was a contractor who had built the restaurant, came in, and then they were like just basically kind of trashing me together, and it was a big mess. And I went in the kitchen, I was crying, and one of my cooks came up to me and he brought me a margarita, and I said, I don't really drink, blah, thank you. And he was like, no, it'll make you feel better, it'll make you feel better. And so I drank a margarita. I drank a second margarita. He said, I'm going to drive you home and I'll take an Uber since you don't drink. I never seen you drink before. We worked together 5 years. I never seen you drink. So I'm going to drive you home. He drove me home. I slept with this person. And I was like, please don't ever tell anybody. He's like terrible. He didn't speak English. I'm like translating on our phone. But I was in a vulnerable and space in that evening and sad. And I then told him, like, don't ever tell anybody, sexual harassment, you work for me, like, it's just, it never happened. And 2 weeks later I was pregnant.
Mm.
I wanted so bad to just make it go away, like, I'm pregnant by someone who doesn't speak English, that's undocumented, that works in my kitchen, like so inappropriate. Like my looking good, my ego, all of that wanted to justify that was a hallucination. That was a hallucination. It was not real. And I knew it was real, and I knew I promised
Mm-hmm.
God, and I knew that when you make mistakes and you didn't know, there's lots of grace. But when you do something and you know it's wrong, there's no grace. It always comes back and smacks you in the face faster than you
Mm.
can. When you justify doing something that's wrong, it always hurts you later. And so I went and I told him, I'm pregnant. You need to break up with the girl at the host stand. We're going to get married. I believe that the father and the mother of a child need to be in the same house, at least for a while. And he was like 23. I'm 37, 36, and he's 23. And he's like, oh my goodness, really? No, no.
Wow.
And he didn't speak English, and I had to learn Spanish, and he had to learn English. And so we got married on Thanksgiving, so it was the only day the restaurant was closed, and everybody thought we were completely crazy. Our vows were like, y'all probably think we're crazy, but we're doing what's best for this baby. So try to support us. And literally that's what our vows were not like we love each other. It was not like that. It was like so humiliating and embarrassing. And we got married, and that was October. No, I was got pregnant in late October, or found out at late October, married on Thanksgiving, and mid-January I lost the baby. And everybody said, "Oh my God, you're free. You can get a divorce. You can get it annulled. Like you're free. You did what God wanted, and He blessed you. He took it away." And I was like, "Oh, okay, maybe. I don't know." And so we're in the inquiry. We've lived together now. We're married, like, and we did this huge catering for an Indian family, and the mother and father, it was their 60th or 50th big wedding anniversary, and they asked for the chefs to come out, and me and him came out, and I asked them, what is the secret to being married for all this time? And
Mm.
they said it was an arranged marriage. We were not in love with each other, and we built every bit of love we have. We built it, and we built it each day to be better than the day before. And we're never looking back for a time when he treated me this better way. We're always looking to build a better future for our family and for our community and for each other. And so, because we've only ever looked forward, that's how we stayed married all this time. And
Wow.
someone translated that to my husband. And that night, through text on our phone translator, we came to the conclusion that maybe that baby's whole job was just to arrange our marriage, and
To bring you two together.
the likelihood of me, like a restaurant owner, multiple locations,
Mm.
like everything, super career driven, super like my body, my choice, like I'm gonna be fucking so cool. Um, and the chances that I would have seen him as a partner just because of so societal pressure or whatever I would have thought people would. I just wouldn't have seen him. I mean, I knew him for he worked for me since he was 19. I would not have ever seen him. He was younger, everything like that. So we decided that it was arranged by God or by the baby or whatever, and that we should try to make it work. And my husband hates the expression try, even when he didn't speak English. He says there's no trying, there's doing or not doing. And so we did being married. And that was 10 years ago and 5 children later. But what I believe is that Osmar is that soul that I aborted,
Did you abort it?
came
Yeah.
back to me because I did what was the right thing for me to do. And that I kept my promise to God. God gave me back that soul that I was meant to mother in some way. And I didn't get to mother him in the way that it would have been, but because it was much later. But I definitely am getting to mother him and getting I couldn't be prouder of him if I had birthed him myself. And he's just extraordinary. And I'm so grateful that he found me.
That's so amazing, Molly. That is so amazing. I totally agree. When you were sitting there talking about the mush, my buddy and I were sitting there, and he was mouthing to me, "That was God talking," and I was like, "Yeah."
Of course.
Hold on one sec, Molly. My laptop's going to die, and I don't want to lose it. Is Robbie or Liz out there? Just see if they. I just need. There's a plug. I just need something that'll plug in. It's. I don't know. They have some here. I know they have some. Um, See if Robbie can come. Well, I think it's in my car. I don't want to anyway. Okay.
I mean, we
So
can
let me
wrap
ask
it
you
up
this.
if you,
What's that?
I said we can wrap it up if your laptop's gonna die.
Well, I know you probably need to. I'm just so thoroughly enjoying this conversation. I had a couple more things I wanted to ask you. One is okay, so he is Osmar is where do we follow him? I found him on Instagram, but tell everybody where to follow him if they're
So it's
interested in following him.
Osmar, it's like Osmar's underscore journey on Instagram. And he's pretty awesome. He's learning with us about regenerative agriculture and he's super inspired about it. And he's big on the carnivore diet. And every day he posts stuff that's going on the farm, moving the sheep, cover crops, planting corn, planting, uh, harvesting potatoes, he posted today. So it's really an extraordinary look at what we're doing as far as regenerative agriculture. And he's an awesome person. People say like, oh, if you're in survival mode or if you're, it's a privilege to eat healthy food and people that are just getting here, people that are underserved communities and all these words that people use to divide us. They can't,
Mm.
they can't think about this. And I think he's such an extraordinary example of noticing something was wrong, following his intuition, looking into it, and then following where that leads. And then because of his extraordinary willingness to listen to his own intuition, the outcome is that he has all the privilege that all of my family has now because he's my child, according to the courts at this point. And so that is all possible for everybody if we really just play full out and in this world. And that is an extraordinary example of being unstoppable and knowing that anything is possible.
Well, he's amazing. I'm so excited to start following him. I've got two more quick questions for you. One is okay, so I feel like Osmar, I may have seen a post of his with this guy. Do you know Will Harris, White Oak Pastures?
Yeah, I do. See, I worked with Kiss the Ground on the board of Kiss the Ground for a long time, and Will went to Congress multiple times on our behalf for the Regenerative America. I don't
Because
know him personally, but just through
you know
uh,
who he is. He talked about how hard it was to convert, his industrialized farm to regenerative farming, and went through times where he wasn't sure he was going to be able to make it. Um, Talk about that process and when so what's your idea? Like if things could go the way you hope they would, talk about
for me
what
personally or for farming as a whole.
for farming in general and for our food supply in general and the scalability of this stuff of localized regenerative farming to feed the
So,
people that we feed.
so my hope would be that, I mean, Will Harris is an extraordinary example of transitioning a system and making more money. And so it is possible. And people that are not proponents of regenerative agriculture because they have an agenda, because if someone is anti regenerative agriculture, they literally have an agenda. And I don't know what it is, but they have an agenda because there's no logical reason that we don't want to transition the entire system. And it is transferable. Like it is Will Harris is a great example. There's a Clark guy that was in the Common Ground, the second film, and there's some huge, I mean, people having thousands and thousands. Gabe Brown started with 4,000 acres under Understanding Ag, and now, I mean, it's millions of acres. This is something that is scalable, and it basically negates the entire carbon conversation. And that's why there's an agenda against it, because they want us to be afraid and willing to make compromises for the environment, instead of saying, like, no, this is the path forward. If we really cared, like, let's say hypothetically the whole planet is going to burn up in a couple of years or whatever they're saying, and Florida's going to be under the water and blah blah blah. Let's say that's true. 100%, let's say it's true. I'm going to, from that lens, then why would we not be spending resources to transition farmers to regenerative agriculture as fast as possible? Why would we still be subsidizing corn and soy and windmills and wind turbines and solar panels that have, we can't even for some of our needs wind and solar. Like, let's stop pretending in fantasy world that we're going to switch and subsidizing all this wind and solar, when regenerative agriculture, bovine, on grass, biodiversity, more plants that are staying in the ground, perennials, less tilling, all can sequester all the carbon that we need to sequester and provide all the meat that we need in the whole world. Will we need to eat less chicken? Yes. Okay. We're gonna have to make some adjustments. We're gonna have to, we're not gonna grow pork in tiny little boxes anymore. We're gonna do pork in forested systems, and we're gonna move them every month, and it's gonna be different. But why wouldn't we be subsidizing that if, for real, we're all about to die in millions of storms and everything? So anybody that's talking against the most powerful tool we have against climate change, and the most powerful tool that we have for healthy soil, and that's what I care about. That's where I'm 100% on. Healthy soil equals healthy gut biome, which equals healthy minds, which equals like less homelessness, less shooting, people randomly going into crowds and shooting, less people killing themselves, less everything that all the mental health we have. Like, what is it? Like 1 in 3 adults is on a antidepressant or some kind of mood altering narcotic. Like, imagine that. Everybody's going through life like a zombie. Sorry to everybody out there taking your pill that you think is making you better. It's not making you better. Like, literally, you want to be able to self-regulate, and God made you to be able to self-regulate if you eat food that gives you the resources to do that. Sorry. So what I believe that is, all these people are saying you'd have to use all this land for and all this water if you were doing regenerative agriculture is not true, because you're cycling, the cows are moving around and then they come back to the original plot, and it depends. There's no way that anybody could even get that statistic, because in places where it's raining a lot, like right now it's raining a lot here in Texas, and so we ran the goats through the whole camping area, and by the time they got to the other side, we could have started them again, but we're not. We moved them to somewhere else that had taller grass. But I mean, we literally could have went back around in a circle. If there was less rain, that would not have been possible. So this idea that we need so much more land is a lie. This idea that you need so much water to create every hamburger, where do people think water goes? Like, I just want to know, like, and I don't eat hamburgers. I'm not a hamburger proponent. I'm just logical. I'm a farmer. I understand water cycles. When you feed a cow water, does it stay inside the cow? Like, it's the craziest thing I've ever heard. It takes billions of gallons of water to make one hamburger. Like, what do you mean? And where did that math come from? The cow drinks the water, and then they pee out almost the same amount of water, like all of us do. Like, this is, and it then waters the ground. If you irrigate a crop, water either evaporates up or it sinks down and then is part of the small water cycle or the big water cycle. Like, it's, what do people mean it uses millions of gallons of water to create a hamburger. It doesn't even make any sense. Where did that water go? It's not inside the hamburger.
There, these are talking points that are
They so said,
designed.
or if everybody ate grass-fed, grass-finished beef, we'd have to use every acre of land in the whole world. It's like literally not true. Guess what? Most beef is not true for pork. It's not true for chicken. If you want to really do less harm when you're out in the world, beef is the choice to do. Most all beef, with the exception of dairy cattle, beef cows are on grass until they go to get fattened up with grain if it's not a grass finished system. Like there is not some place where people are just like stuffing beef cows in and then bringing in food for them. The economics of that is crazy, and you wouldn't be able to produce meat at any logical price. And so whatever math people are doing, we're talking about, okay, so example, my neighbor, he has a cow calf operation, not regenerative, just regular cow calf operation. His cows eat grass or grass hay because he's a hay farmer. He moves his cows around, but not mob grazing. He leaves them too long on the different places, moves his cows around. His cows hit the ground January and they go to auction in November. And then somebody fattens them up. They may then go to grass for a little bit longer and then get fattened up, or they may go to be fattened up after that. And then they're going to be harvested between 18 months and 2 years. So the reality is all cows are living on grass for a large portion of their life. And so this idea that if we ate all grass finished, now if Chuck kept those cows here and finished them here, it's just not how his system works. Would that need more grass? No, it wouldn't, because if you were moving them around, you'd be growing more grass, they'd be fertilizing, and then it's doing that. That's just not how it works. Chuck finances his other parts of his farm and operations by selling those calves at November. That's how that works. But those cows are then going to go somewhere else, eat hay for a while, and then be finished on grain at the very last time. But this idea that we would need every acre of land in the world and that we would use up, and the idea that land that we're grazing cows on is equal to land that we're growing carrots in is also crazy pants, because cows can graze with rocks and all different kinds of things. Good, flat, tillable farmland is not the same as what we're grazing cows on. And we should be grazing cows in between those carrot crops and in between those other crops. So then all those other row crop areas also become grazing land in a regenerative system. We just grazed goats. We moved them every day. And then we planted masa corn. It's going to go into our restaurants. So instead of putting out fertilizer, I grazed goats. And I used the no-till seed drill and I put in corn for tamales and tortillas in the restaurant. Now, it's not like this land is used for corn, so it's not used for grazing, or it's being used for grazing, so it's not used for row crops. It's the same land. When I used to fill out this survey in California for what I was growing, they would come back every year and they'd say, well, it appears you have 38 acres of food and you only have 17 acres of land. And I'd be like, uh-huh. They'd say, well, how is that possible? And I'd say, well, I have an acre or 7 acres of avocados, let's say, and you measure that as 7 acres of avocados. And they're like, yes. And I was like, and there's 20-foot rows in between the avocados. Yes. And so I'm growing cabbage between the rows of avocados, or cilantro between the rows of the avocados. Now, so now I also have 7 acres of row crops.
Yeah.
Which do you want me to count? The avocados or the row crops? And they'd be like, oh, or I'd say, I have 1,500 grapevines around the whole outside of the perimeter of the property, on the very edge of the property. It literally takes up no space. It's on the line of the property. But if you, it was like maybe 2,500. But anyways, it's like several acres of grapes, but it's just on the edge fence line of my entire property. So I don't know. How do you want me to measure that? What do you want me to do? So they are concerned because they want to tax by the acre, but I'm growing 38 acres of food. So people doing this math out there that if we did this, then this. It's a lie. I'm like in the system, in the farming,
Yeah,
seeing
I mean,
real life, and produced $500,000 of produce, as well as eggs and dairy and meat from, but we didn't sell the dairy or meat because it was for family consumption on 17 acres. 17 acres is a tiny farm. I don't know,
yeah.
how much people know about whatever. That's crazy, but that's what biodiversity does. It's not like you're just having this huge field and it's just for goats. We finished the harvesting the corn, and then all those stalks are out there, and then we put the goats or the cows out there and they eat all the stalks, and then they get the soil ready for us to plant the next thing. So is that grazing land or is that row crops? We have to stop bifurcating life, because when we bifurcate a feedlot, it creates a sludge of sewage that's
Mm.
manure that's leaching into rivers and fields and everything like that. But when we have cows on pasture moving, they're fertilizing the and all the microbiology, the little roly-polies and the dung beetles are moving that poop around and creating life rather than a dead zone in the ocean. We've traded our resilience for our efficiency, and we have to stop it.
Yep.
And that's what I always tell
Yep.
people, like, how can we get a little less efficient and a little more resilient? And regenerative
Boom.
agriculture is that answer. And if you can't see that, then you actually just don't understand, because it's so clear. And clear enough that a lifelong vegan was willing to say, I was wrong. This is the path forward. And now I'm willing to give all of everything to that.
Last question is, where do people find you? How can they learn more? What's your website? Where can they
Um,
stay in touch
so
with what you're doing?
my Instagram is Chef Mollie, and it's Mollie with an IE. And you can go to sovereigntyranch.com, or the Kind Sage is my Instagram for my restaurant. And then we have Sage Vegan Bistro. I'm sure that it's going to change, but it'll redirect you. I think we're in the process of changing it to Sage Regen Kitchen. But and so any of those, but you can reach out to me. And we'd love to have you stay on the ranch. We'd love to do your wedding, your family reunion, your yoga retreat, your even we could have a restaurant retreat, whatever we want. I'm down to provide the space. We have 46 beds on the property here.
Wonderful. This has been quite an amazing conversation. I've been so excited about this, Molly. I I basically don't prepare. I've done over 530 episodes. I normally just like to talk, but what you were doing was so interesting to me, so I did a lot of I wanted to make sure I knew what questions to ask. I got my buddy here. He has questions he wanted me to ask you. We're all like super dialed in, so thank you. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the bravery. Thank you for the education and learning and being open-minded yourself so that you can learn and help us all learn and grow from this. You are an amazing lady. You have an amazing family. We'll be staying dialed in for sure with what y'all are doing. Thank you, Molly.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Hey, y'all, before you dial out, just a quick request. If you are listening to this podcast on iTunes, if you would give us a star rating and a comment, it would be so helpful. If you're on Spotify, if you'd follow us or whatever platform you're on, if there's a rating or a follow, please do that. What that does is it tells these algorithms to put this content in front of more people that are looking for this type of content. So if you enjoy the episode, please do that. Thank you so much for listening to Restaurant Owners Uncorked or watching on YouTube. We appreciate you. We're proud to be able to do this, and we're just going to keep putting out great content, y'all. So stay tuned. Thank you.